Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on a Friday, 5 o'clock on a sunny day in Basel. We're very happy to welcome you. My name is Abaseh Mirvali, and I will be the moderator today. And I have to my right Vanessa Branson, who was the founder of, at that point, AIM, now the Marrakesh Biennale. And I have Carson from Berlin, who is one of the two curators for the next edition in 2012. And I have my friend and colleague, Alia Al-Senussi, who's been in the region for many, many years in both the role of a patron and a professional in the arts, and on many of the institutions that are supporting a lot of the work in the region with artists and new projects. And we're going to have a discussion, so this will then facilitate it for you to be able to actually share some of your thoughts and ask questions, as maybe for many of you this is the first time that you hear a discussion on Marrakesh. I would like to preface by saying that none of us represent any specific government or governmental body, and speak as people that are involved in the region, have done projects, and believe strongly in the artistic talents and work that is being created in the region. Today we're going to first start by establishing a little bit of historical behind how this project was created. And I turn to you, Vanessa, to maybe give us a bit of a why Marrakesh?
Okay, well, Abaseh told me that I had to be really quick because I could talk about this for a long time. And I fell in love with Marrakesh because it's a town of contradictions, intrigue, mystery, sensuality. It's got fabulous food, wonderful architecture, and above all, the people are really very, very nice. When I first went to Marrakesh, I was told by a boy who was showing me around all these different ruins that I was hoping to buy. He said, Vanessa, the one thing you have to remember is that in Morocco, anything is possible, but nothing is certain. And I've had this in the back of my mind all the time, and you have this feeling of anything being possible. And so I bought this riad, turned it into a hotel. Everything did feel very possible. And then in 2004, I was listening to the radio in London, and there was a lot of anti-Islamic fervor going on with George Bush saying, you're either with us or against us. And it just felt very, very frustrating to me and very wrong. And so I thought I needed to do something. I come from a history of the art world. I know about the power of debating ideas through the arts. And I thought I'd start a small arts festival to really create a bridge between our countries, our different ideas, and so I started the Marrakesh Biennale, which was then called Arts in Marrakesh, Arts Festival.
What was the first one? How did you focus the first one?
We started in 2005, and there was a big focus on literature then, and I also took an exhibition of contemporary art that was curated from England that had a small overview of young artists emerging in the during the millennium, and we took over the museum there. The Museum of Marrakesh is famous for its few dusty little cabinets with some ceramics in it, and this was a really great exhibition that we brought over. And then we had one or two little film events as well, but it was very personal. We had some interesting debates, and just everybody had a lovely time. We had some amazing people, and then I thought we had something to build on. It was going to be just a one-off event, so you know.
And now we are going to be having its fourth iteration, and you've selected two curators to work with each other. And Carson, who are you? What are you going to be doing? And how is this different? What is going to be different for us as spectators, all of us, many of us coming from Venice right now and going to many of the biennials that happen? What is unique?
Well, thank you for having us on the panel, first of all, I guess. But my background is in architecture, actually, so I don't have a fine arts background or art history background or even curating for that matter, but I've been curating art and architecture for the last 6 years in Berlin. And I guess the first thing that really struck me about the site, about being in Marrakesh, was the palace. And we saw some images, and they'll come back online shortly. But the physical sensation of being there is really powerful. The scale of it, the materiality, the temperature, the changes in temperature, because there's a dungeon as well. That was really what, captured me the most. And my not knowing too much about the Islamic world, about Morocco to begin, but I think one thing that connected between both of us, Vanessa and I, was this sensibility towards space and experience of space. And I thought that this is something that could tie any visitor to the biennial. Everyone's going to experience a space in a similar way, in a physical way. And so what's interesting about this one is, I guess, we're bringing all the artists that are included. And of course, there are artists, there are architects, musicians. We're sending novelists there as well and commissioning short stories in lieu of gallery texts. So instead of walking around with a gallery text with bios of all the different artists, people will read short stories commissioned for the space. We're trying to commission a symphony as well. So the idea of doing a biennial in Marrakesh, where there's a very, in terms of Vanessa's involvement anyway, but not a very long tradition in contemporary art, in the sense that the Western world knows about it. There's an opportunity to do something completely different. There's an opportunity to rethink what it is to make a good exhibition. What does one show in a biennial, and is it limited to visual arts? So I think that's what's going to set it apart.
Alia, you've been involved in the region for many, many years, and you've been there for the beginning, though she's very young, for the beginning and the inception and creation of many projects like Art Dubai. You were there for Sharjah Biennial when Doha came online. How do you think events like this, do they bring in, do they help expand out, go towards? How do you think it changes the setting?
I think that when they're done properly and done correctly, they create a dialogue between the local populations, and not even just, for instance, in Marrakesh, it's not just going to be just the local people from Marrakesh, but it'll be people from all over Morocco. It'll be people from Egypt, from the Gulf, from Lebanon, and those people will have an opportunity to interact because they're all interested in the arts, they're interested in learning about the arts, along with people coming from Europe, from the United States. And I think when these events happen, and when they are inclusive, and they create a forum, as we are in right now, but even just informally, be it if you're walking around at the exhibition, or you're walking around the various projects throughout the town, it gives people an opportunity to kind of open up that dialogue. And at the end of the day, many of these countries are kind of nascent governments, and even in Morocco, the ruling family has been in Morocco for hundreds of years, but at the same time, it's still somewhat of an emerging economy in a developing country, as is absolutely the rest of the Middle East. And I think that's really important for everybody to understand, because while we're trying to build an art world and a dialogue among culture, at the same time, a lot of these countries are building schools and building roads and building infrastructure. So we can't expect everything to happen all at once. And I think that the arts brings that added element to these places.
Do you think over the last few years, doing the different iterations, that you've seen that progress kind of also translate the art being able to be a catalyst for other social change or other even change in other areas?
Yeah, I'd like to think it really does make a difference. I'm not absolutely convinced. I mean, there's not been. I mean, of course, it will eventually, but it's going to happen slowly, and we can't just go and land contemporary art into Marrakesh. And the first novel was published in Morocco in 1962, which wasn't a religious text. There's not been a history of curiosity, because if you were curious and you had interesting ideas, you were locked up, basically. You had to follow the thought and stick with everything. So we're in a very, we have to be very sensitive about what we're doing and where we are. And this is why Carson and Nadim are going to be working with local people. Just in the sheer production of each of the works is going to be made there, and the number of people who are going to be involved in the production and the dialogue that goes into making these things, there's going to be a legacy left behind by that. We're not just expecting people to come along and look at the work and understand it straight away, or but having said that, there is a growing group of students who are very interested. It's happening slowly, and it's incredibly exciting. Last year we had, because we have a film component as well, we had the members of the Orson Welles Film Club. We were two teachers on their mopeds who came to every single film event, and they talked to everybody, and they were completely engaged in the whole thing. And the film club were these two guys, and it was, it's wonderful to see this emerging.
And are you collaborating with other institutions, maybe in North Africa or, for example, Lebanon? I know that there's a film school. In Marrakesh. Will there be collaborations with other institutions in the Near East, or?
I think we're concentrating on collaborating with institutions in Morocco, first of all. So schools, mainly. And this has to do with what we've all been talking about in terms of creating a cultural identity, a heritage there. When I first came on board with the project, the idea, as I was saying, was very much to just do a good show, and the theme is really the site. So in a way, it was a strategy to avoid a lot of the politics, a lot of the questions about religion. But if we're dealing with purely a phenomenological experience, this goes across everyone. And it became very clear that this was not possible, that you had to really understand the context.
How did that become clear to you?
By being there, and by artists asking, by talking to the people there, and also by understanding the cultural history of Morocco, I guess, since 1912 as a French protectorate, in which a lot of cultural manifestations were kind of legislated. Carpets had to be made a certain way, pots and pottery and all those things. The designs had to be regulated by the French. Mm-hmm. And in '56, when Morocco became independent, this kind of held over into Moroccans really wanting to project an international image of themselves, which ended up being a European image of themselves that they're projecting again outside. So arts and culture, visual arts in that sense, has never had the same natural growth that you can say, that it had in Europe. And because of that, we really want to collaborate with schools, with children, not for the biennial per se, but as a kind of precursor to the actual event, to have all the artists going there, do workshops with children, with university students. The volunteers at the tour guides will be university students.
Right.
And so when these kids, after a while, when they see international art shows, it won't be questioning or saying, oh, this is just stuff from the West, but they would have understood, that someone came and gave them a lesson, and when they see the art show, they would, yes, kind of take ownership of that.
My experience living in developing countries, sometimes because we have these social circumstances that are very strong, and we have to be very cognizant of it. But as people that work in our profession, and that's contemporary art, and we want the artistic integrity to be just as strong, how do you protect yourself to not inch too much into the social? How do you make sure, you've worked with a lot of artists, international and many of Arab heritage. How do you make sure that you don't slip into maybe categorizing and letting them off the hook because they're from a region, or how do we hold on to those standards? And then maybe you can comment.
Yeah, well, I think it's it's obviously always an interesting juxtaposition for artists that are labeled as from any country or from any particular culture, be it an Arab artist or a Chinese artist. So if you're doing a show and the overarching theme is, like a pan-Arab exhibition or, a Chinese exhibition, I think, a lot of those artists are very wary of being labeled as anything other than just an artist. They don't want to be like an Arab artist or an Iranian artist. But at the same time, as an artist, their work is informed by their life. So, somebody who grows up, like for instance, Alia, an Algerian living in France, is going to have a very different way of growing up than a white Frenchman living in France. So his work is informed by his experience. We have an artist in the audience, Manal Doayan, who's one at the forefront of the Middle East scene, and she's a Saudi woman living in Saudi, and now has since living in Dubai and traveling the world with her work in a variety of shows. And of course, her work is informed by her life experience. I mean, you can't say that that's not something that will affect an artist's work. So I think as long as we don't go into stereotypes and that everything is about, being behind the veil, and it's all, a woman in an abaya and a woman wearing black, and these are the things that I think become, one should be very worried if that's, what the focus of a work is. But of course, a work should always be informed by an artist's experiences and by their life.
And how many artists have been out so far?
Just under 20.
Just under 20.
Yeah.
And what has the experience been? Have any of them worked before in the Near East, North Africa, Middle East?
Yeah, some have.
Some have.
I think for those who haven't been to that region before, it's been it was a very immediate culture shock, I would say, but one that comes with surprises and fears and tensions, and so a rich experience, I would say. Yeah. And
the questions that they're posing to you as a curator,
well,
and how they produce their work.
We've been trying to. Let's see, how do I answer that? The mandate we give them is to do something site-specific. Okay. So they're really studying the site, and we expand the site to, in terms of the culture as well as part of the site, and also working with local craftsmen. We're trying to make as much as possible of the work in Morocco, and try to have the artists and the craftsmen understand it as a collaboration rather than simply a commission of someone paying someone to do a service. We're acknowledging the craftspeople as a collaborator as well. So I guess working in a context like that.
Do you find that in a community that maybe doesn't have a very strong history of patronage and of governmental institutions supporting works of this nature, programs like this, how is it to create something of this nature? And do you think you're bringing them slowly along, and how are you engaging them? Do you think that's important?
It's been really complicated, this, and to explain the importance of a major contemporary cultural, fundamentally visual arts event to the city bureaucracy is virtually impossible. It's been really difficult. Finally, this year, I think they understand it. And one of the things I hadn't understood completely myself was that there is no city of Marrakesh. There's no local taxation there. There's no the people who run the town have absolutely no power at all over what's going on. The king has all the control from Rabat. And so, because I was going to the mayor and saying, you have to support us. This has to be. I cannot tell you how much added value we're going to bring in. And I finally realised they have nothing to support us with. And so this year, though, in the meetings, they've been saying, we're right behind you, we'll open the doors. I mean, they're not helping us financially, but they are just with their love. And it means a lot, actually. It's been really great, but it's.
Have you noticed a change? Do you think that this is as a result of other work happening in other places? Do you think it's important to engage?
I can't, speak specifically, but I would think so. I mean, I think that, the idea of cultural diplomacy is really finally hitting home in the Middle East, and I think, one sees that through the initiatives in Doha, through the initiatives in, of course, Abu Dhabi. And then, of course, to a certain extent, Dubai, which doesn't have necessarily a government initiative, but with Art Dubai being such a huge kind of center of the Middle Eastern art scene at this point. And one can always talk about, what is the Middle East? What does it mean? Is it the Arab world? Is it Arabic speaking? But, one can just loosely discuss the Middle East as being, North Africa, all the Arabic-speaking countries, and then also Iran and Turkey, because there's a great affinity, I think, one sees with Iranian artists and collectors, along with Arab artists and Arab collectors, and there's a huge kind of crossover, and then to a bit of a lesser extent also Turkish artists and collectors, and I think many of these countries realize now that they're even if they don't care about the arts themselves, they see, like you were saying, the added value of bringing, art collectors and patrons and artists to a city, filling up a hotel, booking airline flights, paying for food in restaurants, and just that added value to their city all year long.
How does that, as a curator, curating, how much do you allow that to influence you? Because you have an international audience that's going to be coming for 4 days, maybe 5, and then the rest of the time it's going to really be colleagues that are interested in the work and the people of Marrakesh and maybe possibly from other cities. How do you find that balance to make a show that stands up to standards that can be beneficial and be kind of educational and pleasing to everyone?
The challenge would be to try to find work that is able to address audience of all different levels. You can be an art critic or art historian, or a tourist that happens to come through the site, or a local Moroccan person with or without background in art. And I think the idea is to, we've been asking artists to really keep that in mind, and to put a lot of thought into the initial impression of a work. And again, I go back to this idea of like a physical impression. So you'll see a lot of installations, there'll be a lot of sound works, a lot of very immersive spaces that are going to be here. I mean, in a way, you can see the images of the palace here, and it's a 16th century ruin. It was built by the previous dynasty that the current dynasty actually took apart. And it was used as a pleasure palace. And there was music there, they had huge parties and stuff like that, and there's a lot of documentation, testimonies about like these grand parties that would happen there. But with the walls and the texture and the kind of history that you can just kind of like, that's so palpable, in a way, it's almost an unfair comparison to ask an artist to come in for a few months and do something to compete with the space.
Right.
So basically what we're asking for is for artists to enhance the experience of the space, to work with the space, and yeah, that's. I
think that's really important that you say that, because I think there's no point in alienating a local population. I mean, we can talk about artists having artistic freedom and not having any censorship, but in so many of the Middle East, and so many of the countries in the Middle East, we want to encourage people who wouldn't otherwise be exposed to art to want to be exposed to art and culture, to want to learn, to want to grow up to be an artist or want to grow up to be a patron. And there's no point doing that with something, you know, kind of unnecessarily provocative. And I think, you know, for an artist to then, you know, to come into this culture that's very different from maybe what they're used to, but then to do something that really speaks to the people there is very important.
You touched on the point that an awful lot of artists from North Africa, filmmakers, writers, all artists, leave their countries and they go to Paris, London, Amsterdam, Berlin. And by having a major arts event happening in their own country, they'll feel that they can stay. They don't need to go away. You know, they can actually.
Absolutely.
So it's sort of the knock-on isn't just you know, for the city isn't just that people fly in for those few days or come. It validates the fact that their art, that they can feel good about being creative people themselves, and this is just so exciting. And it's already, you know, we're only in our 4th edition now, but Marrakesh is becoming a cultural hub. We've got very wonderful residency programs. Dar al-Mamoun, serious creative institutions starting up, artists are staying there, people are getting together, and it's
TEDx.
Then a TEDx, I'm organising TEDx event there in September, and it's just becoming, rather than just being a city that people go and party for a few days or go and have a massage and a lovely meal, people can come back again and again, and there are going to be enriching, interesting things happening. And it just feels so exciting to be part of something that's doing something that it's going to touch everybody on different levels. And you know, come.
Amazingly, I would our time. So I'm going to pass it so that you could ask some specific questions if you wish. The dates are going to be 29th of February through 4th of March 2012 is the opening. But then it goes all the way till the 3rd of June, 2012. And I can attest that it is it's an overwhelming place. The beauty of it is very, it's very strong. It more, you know, like, actually, you know, when I went to the pyramids in Mexico is how I felt about it when I saw Morocco and Marrakesh. It was in this particular palace, I think will be very challenging for many of the artists, because having that much space, I find sometimes scares certain artists. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that much vast space. But do we have any questions in the audience? We were that good? You don't have questions? Oh. There's a microphone. Oh.
This is better than projecting.
If you could stand up.
Yeah.
There's one person behind you, and then we'll take you in the front. No worries.
A simple question about, I recently went to Marrakesh for the first time, a bit of a soft landing for the Arabic worlds, and speaking French made it very friendly, and the people there. But as a photographer, I became instantly aware of that cultural difference, and some people having to respect no photographs and others, and yet there's a long history of photography in Marrakesh, and some incredible photographs at the Maison de la Photographie down the alleys there. And I wanted to ask about that particular cultural sensitivity, dichotomy, and curating it. And maybe if you're working with Maison de la Photographie.
You're asking, you know, why people don't get photograph themselves?
No, I understand the culturally, but photography and video, it's such a modern, contemporary part of any art festival and Biennale. So how that might be incorporated in the festival there.
Carson.
We're working with the Musée de Photography. They're just going to do, we're encouraging a sort of official fringe events, and they're going to be very much part of it, but they're doing their own event. I love the model of the Edinburgh Festival, where you have the official 6 or 7 venues where you know, but then I hope all the other galleries, institutions, people are coming in to do things, artists are doing their own thing as well. And we'll list them all, but we're not going to guarantee the quality of everything. But there'll be some, they'll do something really great. The photography, people's sensitivity to being photographed has definitely increased in the last 10 years since I've been there. And I think I think maybe tourists have just been upsetting people by just going up to lots of poor, lovely-looking old women and snapping in their faces. But I've definitely noticed a sensitivity that's been developing on that front recently more.
Are you going to be able to, the film component will be, there will be the film component like there was last time, but will there be also photography included in the show?
Our immediate strategy was no, because you can't, I mean,
no,
if you look at
that's
these,
why I ask you, yeah.
You look at these walls, it doesn't really make sense to kind of stick a photograph on it, and, you know, but there could be, you know, interesting solutions. There's a dungeon space that could allow for projections and things to happen in the dark. Yeah.
We had a second question.
Sorry.
Yes, you.
Okay.
If you could stand.
Sorry.
We can see you because of the lights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I would like to know if the Biennale have any connection with the Marrakesh Art Fair, which take place on September. And another question is that, is the art dealers who are there help you a lot or not? Are you working together? Thank you.
Again, with the art fair, I talked to, are they here? Are you here? The organisers of the art fair last night, and obviously we have a common audience. I'm very keen that there's an understanding that we are not commercial in any way at all, and I think it gives us a real artistic integrity that we haven't got a commercial element. With the galleries, there are 1 or 2 galleries and 1 or 2 quite good galleries that are opening in Marrakesh now, and we love the idea of them putting on excellent exhibitions and bringing people in and them being part of it. But we're definitely going to, they're not going to be on our official program. It's going to be a separate, you know, they'll be listed separately, but we'll list them so people are aware of what's going on.
Being a wannabe architect, are there going to be any architectural structures? There are?
Yeah. So there will be architectural structures, and we're commissioning architects. We're bringing architects to go there.
Can we know any names? 1 name, 2 names?
Secretive.
No.
Is the title in capitals, low cap, something to go by?
They're really good.
Carson's ambition for this project, he's been so modest. It's really exciting. It's going to be, some of the artists are coming up with some really extraordinary structures, ideas, and you know, I can't quite believe some of the proposals that are coming forward already. You know, I haven't got the imagination to see it, and when it's wonderful what you're doing. Thank you so much. It's great.
Well, there's definitely no lack of enthusiasm in our region. We definitely have enthusiasm. So anything is possible, kind of. If there are no questions, I would like to thank the panelists. These are short, so we encourage you to ask questions, and we definitely encourage you to go on the 29th of February to 4th of March. If not, for the rest of the time, the weather is beautiful that entire time, and see the Marrakesh Biennale in 2012. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.